Do you tend to feel really isolated whenever you even think about talking about your feelings with your manager? Or maybe it's that you're a director and you need to have that really awkward conversation when it's somebody on the same level as you. Maybe you're worried about feeling a little bit weak when you come across. It's totally normal, it's totally natural. We're going to talk about it today. And this is all about how to broach those conversations around burnout, overwhelm, and everything in between. Hi, I'm Caroline. I am your personal performance coach. I debug the mindsets, habits, and communication of aspiring high performers so they can work smarter, not harder. If that sounds like the kind of content that you really like, feel free to subscribe right below. It's free, it takes 2 seconds. I'd love to have you as part of that community. And with that being said, let's get into it. So, why is it so difficult to talk about burnout, to talk about overwhelm or imposter syndrome or any of those mindset based issues? There's a few reasons why. The first one being it's totally subjective, right? There's no one way that you can interpret the idea of burnout. And when I first did that video on burnout basics, I talked about the sheer variety of symptoms that people can experience, whether that's in the workplace and it's kind of productivity based, or whether that's physical symptoms like fatigue and sleep problems or hormonal changes or whatever it happens to be. It is totally subjective. So there's no guarantee that you having this conversation is going to mean that it lands in the way that you really want it to. And that brings in the real cause of the issues about why people don't have these conversations, which is fear. It's uncertainty. It's, oh God, am I going to be seen as weak? And am I going to be seen as not able to do my job properly? What if they judge me for it? What if I lose my job? What if? And it just spirals out of control in our heads, which is really, really bloody unhelpful. And we don't want to go down that route. So we need to start tackling this in a way that feels more empowering, more constructive, and actually allows us to have these conversations in a way where we don't feel weak. We feel like we're standing up for ourselves, which is what it's really about. Now, a question that I get quite a bit is around why aren't workplaces really equipped to deal with this kind of thing? And there's a couple of reasons. So the first one is there isn't ever really a common language. And when I do some of my workshops in person with different businesses, this is something that I talk about. The idea of introducing a common language for people to talk around mindset, whether it is imposter syndrome or decision fatigue, all the way through to burnout or some really sensitive issues, maybe around compassionate leave and loss, or it could be things like menopause and stuff that affect people at different stages of their lives. We need common language as a whole to make sure that our meaning is actually taken in the way that it should be. So there's no reason why mindset can't be a part of that. It's just that, broadly speaking, it just hasn't happened yet. So we tend to see it in businesses that maybe are a little bit more, I don't want to use the word antiquated, but that's really what it is. We see a lot more development in more progressive workplaces like the digital landscape, for example, mental health first aid and things like that. But there's an issue with some of these in that they're not contextual. So you might do as a HR professional or a senior leader or something like that, you might do one of those courses, but what happens after that 2 days or after that afternoon or however long that training is? How contextual is it? Are you taught how to apply them, how to implement them? What happens a couple of weeks after when a situation comes up that you haven't actually been trained for? So while things do exist, they still aren't perfect yet because the implementation of those different tools and techniques or a common language rarely fit the actual need, the actual purpose, which is where it can fall down. And then there's one other reason around this, which is that often, if we're being really honest, managers, leaders, directors, they are not taught this stuff. They're not born coaches. They're not born psychiatrists. They're not born psychological either consultants or therapists or anything. They're not any of those things. They're just a manager that was really, really bloody good at what they did. And now they're managing a team of people. It's a completely different skill set. Yet often people are promoted into those levels, hierarchy bases, and they are not trained efficiently. They're not equipped to deal with any of this stuff. So even when they put those courses into action, they don't have the wider knowledge to apply it effectively. So for example, most managers will adopt naturally a mentoring approach. Mentoring is telling, it's sharing. It's somebody comes to you and says, I have this problem, and you say, no worries, I know how to fix it. This is what I did. This is what you can do. Whereas a coaching approach is one that is more empowering because it questions. It helps the other person to see that they have the answers already, and it helps them to be the creator of their own solutions rather than coming to you for the solutions. Now, how do we apply this to something like burnout? Well, whenever we end up in a stage of burnout, like I've talked about before, we know that it's a prolonged period of stress. There are things and behaviors and stress stimuli that have come into the equation that have not been dealt with effectively, that's led to that. Now, if they'd have had maybe a different approach or a different set of tools in their toolkit, maybe we would have ended up with a slightly different result. But they just aren't taught these things. And by the way, that is no one's fault. It is the way that our development systems have been implemented. It's the way that performance reviews and personal development plans and all that stuff, it's all revolved around when you are really good at something, you get promoted, you get that manager title, but you don't get any of the training or the knowledge or any of those things to actually cope with a people-based role, which is very different from process or anything that is a doer level rather than a leader and strategist level. Completely different toolkit. So it's not really a surprise that there's this disconnect when it comes to, like I said, things like that common language or how to actually talk about mindset. People aren't taught at either end of the spectrum. And so that's where a lot of that disconnect tends to come out and manifest, really. Okay, we're going to do this in 5 steps. How do you talk about burnout? How do you come up with almost like a communication system for anything around mindset? Step number 1, which if you've watched my other couple of videos, you can probably see this one coming, clarity. We need clarity because often, like we said, that fear, that point of uncertainty can be the thing that makes the difference between us having the conversation and not, because it's way too easy to run away from it. And the way that we stop that from happening is to get really, really clear on exactly what we want to say. Now, if clarity is something that you're struggling with at the minute, if you are just so overwhelmed that you just don't know where to start, how do you work out something like that around mindset and where that is coming from? I've got you covered already. If you didn't catch the Burnout Basics video, I will leave a link to it in the description just below. But in that, I talk about the worksheet that you can use to work out that very first stage on clarity. So it's completely free. You can download it right now, and it will help you take that first step around clarity. Now, step number 2 is really pretty simple. It's once you've worked out what that issue really is, write down everything that you feel around it. Don't hold anything back. You can be as emotional as you want. It doesn't have to be, like you write a really angry email and then delete it kind of thing. It's just write it all down, get it all out of your head. Because when it's in your head and you're internalizing everything, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed purely from that way of processing information. So we need to get it out of there. We need to get it on the paper. And usually a good rule of thumb that I give is when you reach a point where it feels like your head is empty, sounds really strange, but roll with me for a second. That's usually a good indicator that you've gotten to the bottom of it. You've gotten everything out of your head that was causing you the overwhelm. And you kind of hit this point of, I think that's it. I think that's everything. You kind of second guessing yourself. That's where you got everything down. Perfect. Now what I want you to do is take a complete break. Go and walk the dog. Go and put the dishwasher on. Go and do whatever you need to do to have a break. And then come back to it when you're feeling slightly more relaxed and as though you've gotten everything kind of calmed down in your system. And then what I want you to do is read back through everything and cross out all the things that are purely emotion. So you will then be left with just the facts of the situation. So you, for example, might start out, let's say it's around workload overwhelm and how bad you feel about it, how it makes you feel, how awful it is, where it's come from, what projects it is, all those different things. But then if you cross out all the emotion, you're left with the projects that are causing you the overwhelm. What happened? Maybe responses that were sent, emails, things like that. That's something that we can talk about because we're basing and rooting our argument, our communication in the facts, not so much the emotion, which is going to be really important later on in one of the further steps. So now that we've gotten really, really clear about what the driver is, and we've got everything out on paper, and we know that balance between what's emotion and what is fact, now we're ready for step 3, which you're not going to like me for. I want you to put a meeting in the diary with the person that you need to have this conversation with. So if this is somebody that's watching this that is a leader, and you are thinking, well, how do I apply this to somebody that I'm managing? And I think that they might have burnout. I've got you covered for that as well. I'm going to come back to that, but roll with me for a second while we go through these steps. So what I want you to do is pick the right place and the right time. And that is actually a really interesting trick, because the right place might be wherever you feel the most empowered. So for example, if you know that you're going to be better face-to-face, get a meeting in the office. Or if you are virtual and you don't have an office and you're near them, maybe do that at a coffee shop or something like that. Wherever you feel at your best is where you should have that meeting. And then the other thing, time, is more about when you're going to be your best version, and also when your other person is as well. So whether that's a manager or somebody at the same level that's just your direct report, when are they likely to receive this information best? Because it can be quite a sensitive conversation. Some people go on the defensive. We want to get them in their best mood, but we also want to make sure that we're at our best as well. So if you tend to have more energy first thing in the morning versus end of the day, that's how we need to shape this conversation. We need to walk into it knowing that we're kind of already successful. We feel like we're at our best. It's at the best time of day to be talking about it, and we're in the place that provides us with the most security. So we're reducing that fear response over and over again. Now, if this is with your manager, by all means, use your regular one-to-one slot for this. But if you are more senior, those one-to-ones with a direct report tend to be fewer and far between. So you're going to need to actively put this in the diary. Now, a question that I often get when I ask people to do this is, but how do I say that? How do I say that without coming across as really defensive and maybe they'll take it wrong? And what do I do? There's no need to kind of get that 10 steps ahead stage quite so soon. What we need to do is just think, well, how are we going to get the best response? Well, it's to remove any cause for fear on their part. So we ask for the meeting whilst telling them exactly what it's for, because we've all been in that situation, right? Where maybe our managers ask for a meeting and we don't know what it's about, and that makes us feel really freaked out. Like, oh my God, I'm about to get fired. I'm about to get this, that, the other. What is it? What is it? What is it? I need to know now. We need to remove that completely from the equation. And we do that by saying, I've been reflecting on my performance recently, and I think there are a couple of areas that I could really improve, but I need some help and some guidance around it. Is that something that we can have a conversation about? They're obviously going to say yeah, right? They're not going to turn around and say no to that. And you've told them what it's about. You've clearly articulated the purpose of the meeting, the focus of it. So there's no reason for them to feel any kind of fear. So they don't feel defensive. You feel like you're able to actually voice your opinion. There's a clear ownership there that you're going to be leading the conversation. It's the best setup you can ask for. So now we're down to step number 4, which is to prep properly for this conversation. And this step kind of leans then into obviously having the conversation. That kind of crosses over a little bit. So the first thing is you want to know what you want to say. And I don't just mean about, those things on your list that are quite factual. I mean, you want to know what the expectation is. So you want to set the expectation of what you need from them in that conversation. So you want the things that you want to cover, i.e., the things that are causing you burnout, the facts, the things that have happened, your reflection on them, what you think that means, where you think you can improve, those things that we talked about. But you also want to set the expectation with them about what you need from them. Because often leaders, managers, or people that are just walking into a conversation where they feel like they are stepping into some sort of authoritative role, they will default to mentoring. They will default to telling, to fixing the problem. And we want to stop that, because that isn't always necessarily what we want. Maybe we do want that in some circumstances, but regardless, we need to be the one to tell them that. We need to be the one to take ownership of the conversation and say, and what I need from you is this. So you get the floor space to clearly articulate what is causing you stress, burnout, all those things. And then you have the floor to be able to say, and what I need is this, so that their responses are a little bit more curated. We don't want them going into defense, because the defense on their part comes from fear. It comes from stress. It comes from an uncertainty on their part. They just want to get out of the conversation if they want to go into that defense mode. We want to stop that from happening. And we want to be clear about what we need from them. The next thing that we want to do in terms of prep is make sure that we provide regular chances for them to give you feedback as well. Because again, they're going to be sat there internalizing, if they are in defense mode, thinking, when can I interject? So we want to provide them with natural points at which to do that. And the best way to do that is around areas where you genuinely have concern or you have questions. So if you start talking about burnout and you talk about how you feel and you lay out the facts and the things that you think have led to it, not necessarily like this has led to it, because there's a big difference between something like, I'm burnt out because of these things and it's your fault, essentially, is what we're trying to say. We don't want to go down that route. It's far more effective to say something like, I'm noticing a dip in my performance when these things tend to happen. And I think that the pattern is that I say yes far too much because I'm worried about coming across in the wrong way. Is there something that I can do to improve on that? Can you help me to understand priorities? But, obviously fill in the type of ending and the question that suits your circumstances. But there's a big difference between the two. One is more accusatory. The other one is curious about what their insight is. It's asking them, what do you think of this? And people love to give that kind of opinion. And it kind of eases into, again, that expectation of what you need from them. So providing them with regular chances at which to feedback, at which to interject is really useful at, again, stemming the tide of any kind of defense mechanisms that we don't want to happen. And then, of course, the other thing in terms of prep is we need to know what the outcome is that we want. We don't ever want to go into a difficult conversation, whether it's about this or anything else, without knowing what we want the outcome to be. So when you get really clear in that first step around certainty, clarity, what it is that is causing burnout, you already know what your issue is that you're trying to resolve. So think, what is the ideal scenario? What is the thing that would make the difference to me? So we know that that is the end goal. We want to guide them towards it with the questions that we ask, with the way that we ask for insight, with the way that we describe things, the questions we use. All of that guides them towards the outcome that we want, so that we can leave that feeling like that was a productive discussion, I got what I wanted, or I got as close to it as I could do, depending on the circumstances. And then, of course, step number 5, we need to own the follow-up. Because this is the thing, it's pointless doing all of this if we then kind of shunt everything over to our direct line manager or senior person. If we just shunt responsibility and accountability for this over to them, all of that hard work just goes out the window, because it will never happen. Nobody will ever prioritize your development, your mental health and well-being, your performance like you will. So there's no point in leaning into other people. Own the follow-up. Whatever you decided, the actions, the focus, the whatever it is that came out of that meeting, make sure you are the one to follow up on it and to either get it in black and white on email or to go ahead and take the action, whatever it is. Now, I promise for any managers out there that are maybe thinking that they're spotting signs of burnout in their team, that I would give some tips around that and how do you change this system? Well, that's pretty easy. We want to swap stages 3 and 4 with steps 1 and 2. So we want to make sure that we set up the right time and place and that we prep correctly for the conversation. Then we have it, and then we might decide that we work through that burnout worksheet with them. We might help them, because if they're quite junior or maybe just less experienced at this kind of thing and mindset issues and all that jazz, we might actually want to help them to do that. So we just swap around those 2 steps. So we do the prep and we set up the meeting first. Then we move into, okay, let's work out why you're burnt out. But obviously we want to let them lead the conversation. We want to just say that what we've noticed, we strip it down to the facts. We do the same thing that we did there. We want to enter with the facts. We want to let them get emotional if it's appropriate, if they want to open up to us. Amazing. But if they don't and they're not ready to do that, it's not our place to push that. So go with steps 3 and 4 first, have the conversation, and then based on whatever happens after that point, it might be appropriate or not to go with 1, 2, and 5. But the key thing is that the person that needs a behavioral change is the one that owns the behavioral change. They're the one that owns the actions and the takeaways. There's no point. All we can do is draw awareness to it as a manager or a leader. We can't, it's an old phrase, but it really works. You can lead a horse to water. You cannot make it drink. And it is the same with this or anything else. Now, this video has hopefully helped you to articulate burnout and whatever mindset challenges and symptoms of that you are dealing with. The purpose of this video is not to fix it immediately, because burnout is something that takes a long time to develop. It doesn't go away overnight. But the purpose of this video is to help you to take those first few steps to tackle it. And one of the key ones is to communicate how we're feeling. To recognize that we are not alone. The fact that you're watching this video shows me that you already kind of know that, because I'm here to help you. There are so many other people out there that can help you. But the ones that can help you the most are the ones that are closest to the situation. If you are in the workplace, then it will be your manager or your line report, whoever. If it is personal life that's causing the burnout, it's the one closest to you. If it's even just being able to communicate this to your doctor or whoever needs to hear it in the medical field, the ability to articulate how we feel in a way that lands in a way that we want is everything with this, because we are dealing with such a subjective topic. So I really hope that this video has helped you to do that. Again, I will leave links to everything in the comments around that worksheet, so you can go ahead, feel free, download it, all that jazz. But I would love to see you again here next Monday for the next video, where I will continue this series around burnout and hopefully helping you to tackle it more effectively. So please feel free to like, subscribe, thumbs up, all that jazz below, and have a great week, and I'll see you soon.